Hi, I feel like I'm gonna have a lot of fun covering 1999 as it was jam-packed with cool releases. But since a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video must be worth at least 1,000,000. So, let's check them out. Kingpin Life of Crime is a fantastic first-person shooter and a title that was largely overlooked, mainly because of its release date so directly after a terrible Columbine high school incident. The adjacency meant that many retailers in the US refused to take it on, and since it came out in 1999, the optional online release was rather unlikely. The game begins with our protagonist beaten up and left to death by the associates of the city's crime boss, the titular Kingpin. And since the city, located in an undisclosed area of future US, is entirely run by crime, the authorities are nothing more than mere puppets, and you've no way to turn for help. So, you get up, dust yourself off, and decide to find those who hurt you, whomever hired them to, and pay them all back some of that good old-fashioned bullet-delivered justice. As you're on your mission of payback, casually putting in place anyone who stupidly decides to stand in your way, you'll be able to interact with many of the citizens, asking them for clues, earning some extra cash performing tasks for them, and to buy weapons. Most of all, however, you can also hire some of them to accompany you on your crusade of revenge as your hired muscle sidekicks, which is just so cool, especially for an action shooter from the late 90s. Kingpin Life of Crime is set in a very dark, gloomy, dystopian-looking near future, feeling a little like Blade Runner, but set more or less 50 years earlier and in a city run by crime lords and not corporations. The aforementioned citizens too are not your everyday happy families, shoppers, joggers or Starbucks drinking bunch, but in majority of cases thugs, killers, women of the night, yep, that's how I'm planning to call them for the YouTube algorithm reasons, and homeless. So navigating the city and conversations with its denizens require a very certain kind of suave. At the time of its release, Kingpin was a pretty innovative and interesting title to get lost in. It introduced weapon modifications, which allowed you to change the parameters of your armament, increasing its firepower, number of bullets in a mag, or fire rate among others. It split the armor value into 3 areas of head, body and leggings, and used different values of damage for each of these, meaning that the shot in a head was always more effective than the one in a leg. Though it has to be said that the arrow in a knee is an exception, cause as we know, I too was an adventurer like yourself until I took an arrow to the knee. Enemies bleed and even leave trails of blood if running away and wounded, so that it's easier to chase them. Graphic depiction of violence, profanity in the dialogue and very satisfying and action-packed gameplay is what made Kingpin such a memorable title. I just wish that there were more people who'd had a chance to check it out. Freespace 2 is a space combat simulation shooter in first and third person perspective. You play as a member of GTVA, Galactic Human Vasudan Alliance, which is fighting both human rebels who call themselves NTF, so Neo-Terran Front, and an aggressive alien race of Shivians. The game is set 32 years after the events of the first one and puts you in the middle of this triangular conflict. Simply put, Freespace 2 is an upgrade on the original's formula, leaving what was working well untouched, improving on the presentation and adding features. So you get more and better ships and weapons than before, with an option to fly older ships if you'd really like to. There are more types of ships in the game, and they're very distinct between all 3 races, with human ships looking utilitarian and simple, Vasudans being rather nice and artistic looking, and Shivians asymmetrical, sharp and aggressive, just the way they are. There are also huge capital ships in the game now, and they're like hundreds of times bigger than the regular fighters and often fight with one another. So flying your fast and nimble fighter between the two worrying and exchanging shot behemoths is truly a sight to behold. Especially if amidst all that chaos, you are chasing an enemy to put him down too, and he's really keen on not letting that happen. I mean, the beams that the capital ships shoot at each other are often much wider than your ship, making you feel like an ant among fighting giants. Imagine the scale. Another fun thing added to the game are the nebula, which are sort of interactive environments, as not only they impair vision, but also occasionally disrupt the operation of flight electronics, meaning that they can be used for ambushes and /or as a part of your tactical maneuvering. The overarching plot in Freespace 2 is not just for decoration there either, and is actually involving and interesting if you keep following it. But most importantly, it responds to your choices and mission successes and failures, offering different endings depending on how you did throughout the campaign. Freespace 2 is action-packed, hella fun and superb if you're into the whole space dogfighting and an all-out wars. It's one of the most overlooked games of the year, while being one of the most interesting in the same time. Crusaders of Might and Magic is a third-person action-adventure RPG set in fictional Might and Magic universe and the world of Ardon. You play as Drake, once orphan and the lone survivor of the attack on your home village. saved by the blind hermit Normandy and raised by him as if you were his own. Now, as a grown-up, you must join the High Guard to fight the Fallen, an undead army led by the so-called Necros, the highest and most fearsome of the necromancers, which may also give you a chance to avenge your long-lost family. Using melee weapons and magic, you stand against the Scourge and will fight your way through few realms, cleansing them of the undead forces, eventually facing the evil Necros himself. Crusaders of Might and Magic is a new take on Might and Magic formula, neither going the route of mainline RPG series, nor being similar in any way to the Heroes of Might and Magic. It banks on action-based gameplay and, well, kinda fails. I mean, it's not a terrible game, but clearly lacks direction and polish. You can run, jump, duck, cow, chicken, duck, fight with many different weapons and even cast spells. So you know, all the bases are covered here, but Crusaders kinda feels as if it was made over a few long weekends and out of assets and engine retrofitted from something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's the case, I just feel that it might have been better if it had been given more attention. Now that I've checked it, it seems that indeed devs of the Windows version were given 7 months and an older FPS engine to remake it into a third-person view one. Since they were giving jack shit and told to make diamonds out of it, the fact that they managed to come out with brass is quite impressive too. As you go through the game downing enemies same way you would down flies with your fly swatter, so waving your weapon maniacally in all directions all at once, you naturally gain experience, which when accumulated provides you with level ups. These instantly heal you and raise your offensive ability and maximum health and mana caps. Mana is naturally used for casting spells, which can be upgraded with found spellbooks. And while these are not bad and rather useful, they take a second to cast, and when you do, you're susceptible to attacks, so make sure to time them well. I know I've complained quite a bit about Crusaders, and I stand by what I said, but I also have a soft spot for it. The hack and slashing can be enjoyable for a little while, and most fetch quests don't get much in the way of it. Weapons are plenty and often have unique properties, like the amazing boomer axe, that when thrown hits the enemies in an arc and then returns promptly to your hand. It just all feels like it could have been more and better. Like the game was found in when it could be hand-delivered, so to speak, a half or so of a year later. Either way, Crusaders are interesting and worth remembering for what they were. This may sound really odd, but in the late 90s everyone wanted more Ds. Take it as you will, but the Ds that I'm on about here are the additional ones that turned the largely exploited by 1999 2D into the Wild West lands of new, shiny and near unexplored 3D. Ubisoft was no different. So they took incredibly popular Rayman, gave it a makeover, slapping it with extra Ds all around, and we've ended up with today's game. Rayman 2: The Great Escape. Most likely escape from all those Ds. Also, a video is probably going to bump after being found by the YouTube algorithm, no doubt misrepresenting all those Ds. Anyway, let's put all our Ds away and focus on the game. Rayman 2 is a 3-dimensional action platformer and as good of a game as the original was, which was not a given with those kind of jumps into the unknown, especially on the first try. The game is set in the world called the Glade of Dreams that is currently invaded and occupied by the oh-so-evil armada of interstellar robo-pirates led by no other than the Admiral Razorbeard, a name which is more menacing than all the historical Black or Red beards, and pretty cool too. Robo-pirates have destroyed 100 planets before invading the Glade of Dreams, and if our hero is not gonna stop them, the counter will no doubt soon jump to 101. So now, you, my dear viewer, world saver and incredible dresser, have to lead Rayman on his mission to rid the land of the evil and bring it back to its former glory, saving his friend Globox in the process. While the levels are rather linear, they're incredibly designed, beautiful and lush, and a pleasure to witness. You run around fighting robo-pirates and collecting lamps, so small shards of magical energy, and if you manage to accumulate plenty enough of them, the new areas and stages will unlock. The objective of most levels is to get to the exit while defeating the enemies and saving captured and locked off creatures, so-called teensies. Most of Rayman's iconic abilities are unavailable upon the game start and will unlock by progression, offering a pretty decent incentive to carry on playing. As in most other 3D games, there are tons of different environmental objects in Rayman 2, so stuff like explosive barrels that are thrown, giant plums that can be ridden to carry our hero through dangerous surfaces, or even rockets to ride onto the new areas. And all these and many more are a part of omnipresent environmental puzzling. Rayman was successful and, more importantly, amazingly charming and addicting game. Also one that was beyond difficult. And this 3D iteration manages to capture and recreate it all, albeit in a tad easier format. X Beyond the Frontier is set in the year 2912 AD, and you're Kyle Brennan, test pilot for Earth's latest wormhole jumping spaceship. Well, one we assume is capable of said jump at the very least. and as you test it out, sitting in the cockpit, pushing all the buttons and pulling on levers, earning the money to pay for Netflix, Max, Amazon Prime and the likes. I should really mention YouTube Prime here for the algorithm, shouldn't I? So yeah, money to pay for that too. Something odd happens, and you end up in an unknown part of the space with a broken ship, no idea where you are and how to get home. Well, if getting home is at all possible, that is. Fortunately, you're found by the Teladi, a highly capitalist civilization who repair your ship and agree to lend you some money to earn more of it and be able to repay them for their quote-unquote kindness. I really don't know what to think about it, it just seems to be extortion with some extra steps. Anyway, you're left in an unknown part of the universe to your own devices, with a tiny bit of money, a rather bare-bones ship, and indebted to an alien race. From that point onward, it's up to you and you alone to decide when and if you'd want to follow the main plot or just focus on living in this new and captivating universe full of unknown alien races and planets and places to discover. It's worth pointing out that while you start off seeking a way to come back home, the story will evolve and refocus into something entirely different and perhaps much more important, at least on a universal scale. X Beyond the Frontier is a first-person perspective sci-fi space opera focusing on trading, discovery and combat. There are 54 systems in the game, each with its own unique planetary bodies and space stations. There are a few different races of aliens, and the in-game economy is entirely dynamic, meaning that it responds to supply and demand and how you influence it with your actions. Your ship can naturally be upgraded with better and more deadly weapons, stronger shields capable of withstanding more damage, and bigger cargo hold. In time, with some money earned, you'll even be able to buy factories that will bring in regular shipments of money. Combat is not as frequent in Beyond the Frontier as it is in its follow-ups, and while it's pretty enjoyable, it only is if you master the controls. And while the game is a decent start to an amazing series, I always felt that the controls and the new player introduction to any of its entries is rather unclear and disappointing. The entry threshold is just a tiny bit too high for comfort. X Beyond the Frontier is an important game as it started a long-running and lore-rich series that are beloved by millions and keeps receiving new entries to this very day. Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation is the fourth entry in the action-adventure series of games starring lovely and more curvy than the beach ball Miss Lara Croft. Millennia ago, Horus outwitted the evil god Set and imprisoned him in a secret tomb. 5,000 years later, our beautiful archaeologist-turned-adventurer Lara Croft unknowingly released Set, fulfilling the ancient prophecy of his return to plunge the mankind in darkness. Now you, playing as Lara, have to embark on puzzles and dangers-filled journey through Egypt to stop this evil from emerging and dooming us all. Also, to clean up her mess, as clearly, without you, she won't be able to handle it on her own. Other than the story, which is very supernatural this time, and the graphics that had a slight facelift, adding extra environmental details and some polygons to Lara's already quite realistic for the time upper body, not much has changed. I mean, sure, there are 2 extra weapons added, so revolver and a bow, that second with a different set of arrows for different occasions, from poisonous to explosive, and a laser sight to be mounted on them for precise aiming. But that's pretty much it. Whatever else there is in the game, it's what we've known and got used to in the previous entries. So running like the Olympic sprinter, jumping like a kangaroo, that's a stupid comparison but whatever, swimming like a fish, shooting like a gangster, so without aiming, just directing her guns in general direction and holding the trigger pulled like a maniac, and puzzling like a boss that she is. And you are too, cause you're you. Oh, come to think of it, there are a few small minor things that changed too, like Lara being able to pull levers and open trapdoors while jumping, and move around the corners while hanging from the ledges. But to be honest, that's something you wouldn't even notice while playing. Anyway, if you liked previous entries, this one's as juicy, action-packed and fun as they all were. And while perhaps it doesn't innovate a lot and only ever builds upon the foundations of the earlier games, it's fun, and if that's all you're looking for in your games, The Last Revelation provides it in heaps. Mortyr is one of the first Polish first-person shooters made for Windows, and it is set in the alternate version of the 21st century, one in which Germans won the World War II and have largely taken over the entire world. London was first to fall, then Moscow, and a little while later even Washington DC. The war was short, bloody and effective. Mortyr starts in the year 2093, 148 years after the war, when the Earth, after numerous dangerous experiments and totalitarian rule, is slowly nearing its end via weather-related Armageddon no less. Or so it seems, as all signs point to the Axis victory in 1944 being the start-off point of the changes. You play as a scientist, son of General Mortyr, traveling back in time to find the reason for the upcoming destruction with a mission to prevent it, whatever means necessary. and saving the planet may actually require you to change the history. You could say that Mortyr tried to recreate the charm and feel of its software's Wolfenstein, but did not manage to do so effectively. Cause other than the story and graphics, most of its design choices were rooted in the early 90s and did not innovate too much, which meant that the potential players were split into three groups. Those who hated it, those who didn't care much for it, and Polish FPS fans who liked it because it was Polish. The game is composed out of over 20 levels, with most of them set in the past and some in the future. There's quite a few World War II era appropriate weapons available, from pistols and machine guns to flamethrowers and rocket launchers and anything in between. Enemies are rather varied too, so you'll fight against guards, SS officers, snipers, Gestapo and even trained dogs among others. So on that front, there's not much to complain about either. So where's the problem then, you may wonder? Well, Mortyr gets old. Fast. Especially that you don't get any real objectives in most levels and all you really need to do to complete them is to find the key and get to the exit. And it's a design choice that had little staying power in 1999. If you're into the FPS genre, it's definitely worth a look, but if you're not, then it's an easy choice to skip. Might and Magic 7 for Blood and Honor is the 7th installment in the long-running series of role-playing games and one that follows up on the plot of the 3rd and 6th game at the same time. I know, crazy. But such were the Might and Magic games. They didn't ask for permission, they just did what their devs felt like it, and more often than not, it seemed to work. This time is no different. It's a first-person perspective RPG behemoth, sporting a dual combat system, which allows for the encounters to play out in real time or in turns, whichever the way you prefer. Personally, I always lean towards turns, but there's reasons to play in real time too, like the ability to hide behind the objects to avoid projectiles, so it's worth to keep that in mind. You start the game by creating a party of 4 heroes, this time however they don't have to all be humans and you can make elves, dwarves and goblins too. The class and skill systems from previous entries largely retained and works as well as it did there. So good, but not great. Upon game start, your party wins a castle of Harmondale and the surrounding lands in the scavenger hunt, but as soon as they claim it, they realize that not only it's in a dreadful state requiring repairs all around, but also currently holds some unwanted guests. What's more, after clearing it, it soon becomes obvious that the castle was a reward in a competition because it lays in the lands disputed by the two warring nations, and owning it is more troublesome than anything else. While Might and Magic 7 is chock full of smaller and bigger side quests and activities, the main quest will not only be very involving, but will also contain 2 crucial choices to make along your adventure. First, optional, but still impactful, especially on one of the 2 opposing nations, and the other, even more profound and important, and mandatory, and will change how the entire game plays out from that point onwards to the very end. Might and Magic 7 places a lot of emphasis on moral decisions, allowing your party to ally itself with various different minor and major factions along your adventure and eventually decide whether it will stand on the side of good or evil, making for a much more involving and personal story. If you're a fan of RPGs, Might and Magic 7 is a no-brainer, it looks decent, plays great and serves the story like no other at the time. If you're not, consider checking it out despite that, as you may find yourself getting into it anyway. F-22 Lightning III is a flight combat simulator made by Novalogic, veterans of the genre and the 3rd installment in its series. I'm not a huge fan of simulations, only ever liked few of them, but I've tried many and this one's no exception. That said, my experience with it is very short and limited in scope, so most I will tell you about it will be based on what I found on it online. F-22 features 3 game modes of Quick Mission, Campaign and Multiplayer, and they're precisely what their names imply. First, serves one of combat encounters and is probably the best utilized to familiarize yourself with the craft and learn how all the weapons work before you jump into the campaign, which is the main dish of the game, so to speak. It features a series of different missions set over tropical desert and mountain environments for which in most cases you won't care about at all, focusing mainly on dogfighting and your objectives. I seriously doubt that the game's multiplayer servers are still running, but when they were, even up to 128 players could take part in games of Deathmatch, Raptor Air War and Co-op, with the last 2 also implementing voice communications between the players, adding a lot to the feeling of realism and fun of gameplay. The weapons available are varied and interesting, all real too, but the only one I will mention here today is the B-61 thermonuclear bomb, which you get to use in the game. and it's not something that could be said about nearly any other title at the time. It comes with a rather awe-inspiring view of a nuclear explosion mushroom cloud, complementing already fantastic visuals of the simulation. In the end, Novalogic hit a jackpot with this one, mixing beautiful graphics, excellent sound design, interesting missions and weapons, with very easy to learn and master for the genre controls. F-22 was a game that everyone could enjoy, even such flight simulation noobs as myself. If you're interested at all, check it out, it's pretty good. If you're a long-time viewer of this channel, you know what's the first thing that comes to my mind with games titled like Urban Chaos, right? Exactly, my boss's wife. Cause that's precisely what happens whenever she leaves her suburban mansion and comes to town. Chaos emerges, accidents occur all around, people fall off the roofs, get hit by passing cars and begin to experience an uncontrollable and unfound anxiety. And nobody knows why. Well, I do, and now you do too. But since I should really focus on the game and not what the demonic creature is up to, I will. Urban Chaos is a beat-em-up brawler, not unlike better-known Final Fight or the Punisher games from the arcades, but in full 3D and running like a charm on your PC. The game is set in the near future, that's a bit darker than our current reality, with population largely unhappy with how things are run and done, and some resorting to crime and violence to release the anger and for monetary gains. What's worse, it is believed that the unhappiness and unrest uprising did not come from nowhere and that there's a sinister cult behind it all. Even more reason to think that the demoness I work for dipped her crusty toes in it all. So now, you, playing as either a Cap Darcy Stern, a stern name I must add, or Roper McIntyre, are roped into solving the situation one punch or kick at a time, putting enraged folks in their places and bringing back peace and justice to the city. As you progress through 24 non-linear and largely open levels, you unlock a third additional character that is perhaps a bit slower than the initial two, but he hits like a tank. The maps/stages are not very big, but are filled to the brim with interesting objects, indoor areas, people to talk to or even fights to intervene. They often have objectives which are quite varied and fun, but not overly difficult to achieve. They can be assaults on enemies, hostage rescues, or even stopping someone from committing self-harm, which is obviously a word starting with the letter S that I cannot say here aloud thanks to the YouTube's brilliant algorithm. Thanks, Google. There's naturally more, and they are all pretty cool and enjoyable to complete, sometimes having more than one solution. Enemies are rather varied, but nothing groundbreaking or out of ordinary. What shines most, like the hairless dog's balls in Urban Chaos though, is the rather complex combat system. It incorporates kicks, punches, throws, tackles, and even two weapons of a knife and a baseball bat. And all that put together makes for a hella fun romp and a game that's breeze to go through. That could be made even better if it included a multiplayer in some form. 1999, what a year. And you know what? I've still not covered the best games in these first 3 episodes. So you can be sure that we'll have a lot more fun for the next month or so. For now though, let me know what you think of today's selection in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.